Matt Damon, a man forged in chaos, a soul tempered in the fire of hardship, and one of the most resilient legends Hollywood has ever known. From the cracked walls of a broken home with poverty clinging to every step, he rose to become one of the most unforgettable stars ever to grace the screen. Matt Damon is the brilliant mind behind Good Will Hunting, the fearless Jason Bourne who rewrote the rules of action cinema, the soldier in Saving Private Ryan who carried the sorrow of an entire generation, and the commanding figure in Oppenheimer who gave history a human face. With every film, he turned pain into strength, wounds into triumph, and discipline into art. A man who stood among legends, yet shone brighter than them all. But even legends know blood and tears. Behind that dazzling light lie wounds few could ever endure, the unbearable pain of losing those he loved most, the years of pushing his body beyond its limits for art, and the silent moments of darkness when the applause had faded. And now at 55, when the world believes he has found peace, a storm still whispers his name, unseen yet near. Before we begin, give Matt Damon a like as a tribute to the man who rose from ruins to conquer the impossible, whose light burns brightest in the shadows of pain. It's heartbreaking how some lives are tested before they even begin. When a child's first lullaby is silence and love slips away before it can be remembered. Some destinies are not born in sunlight, but in shadow, where warmth must be built from what's left behind. That was the beginning of Matthew Page Damon. Born on October 8, 1970, in Cambridge, Massachusetts, a city of intellect and privilege where great ideas filled the air. But for one small boy, the world already felt fractured. His father, Ken Damon, a stockbroker with quiet ambition, left when Matt was just 2 years old. There were no fights, no shouting, only the sound of footsteps fading down a hallway, a sound he would carry in his chest for years. His mother, Nancy Carlson Page, a devoted professor of early childhood education, took her 2 sons, Matt and Kyle, to a small communal house shared with 6 families. The ceilings were low, the walls thin, and the sound of other people's lives seeped through them at night. Money was scarce, privacy almost non-existent. But Nancy filled the silence with the steady rhythm of her voice, calm, warm, unshakable. By lamplight, she graded papers while her son slept, her tired hands smelling faintly of chalk and coffee, building stability out of exhaustion. Matt would later say, "There was love, but there was also distance, and I grew up trying to fill that space." That distance shaped him. At 6 years old, he already knew what absence felt like. Not anger, but emptiness. He once watched other children leave school hand in hand with their fathers and understood, without words, what was missing. The lesson was cruel but clear. If life would not give him protection, he would have to create himself. Nancy taught him that intellect was never an excuse for arrogance. "You're not special for being smart," she told him. "You're responsible for what you do with it." Those words became his compass. Under her care, imagination became survival. Books replaced toys, and ideas became companions. In that small apartment, between the smell of coffee and the murmur of neighbors, Matt learned that thinking deeply could be a form of escape, a way to build worlds where nothing broke apart. By the time he reached Cambridge Rindge and Latin School, he was still quiet, but something burned beneath the calm. His drama teacher, Jerry Specca, noticed it. The way he hesitated before speaking, then poured his entire soul into a single line. Acting wasn't about applause for Matt. It was oxygen. On stage, he could rewrite reality, make broken families whole, make endings kind. And when his friend Ben Affleck began landing bigger roles, Matt didn't envy him. He studied him, learned, and turned frustration into fuel. At 16, he wrote his first short screenplay, not for fame, but to imagine a world that didn't hurt. Cambridge, with its professors and poets, could be unkind to a boy without status, but he found belonging in creation. Each rejection hardened him, not into bitterness, but into discipline. There were still moments when the old silence returned, when he missed the sound of his father's voice or the closeness that never came. But he had learned something that would carry him for the rest of his life. Pain could be reshaped. In the smallest spaces, he had discovered infinite worlds. The boy who grew up surrounded by 6 families but feeling alone would one day stand before the world not as a victim of absence, but as proof that even from broken beginnings, greatness can rise. He came from silence, but his life became the sound that never fades, a reminder that sometimes the quietest souls grow loud enough to move the world. Dreams may have saved him as a boy, but the real world was far less kind. The silence that had once shaped his childhood soon gave way to the noise of survival. At Harvard University, where the air itself seemed thick with ambition, Matthew Damon was a young man with an old soul, studying English literature while nursing a secret, a story he couldn't stop writing. It began as an assignment scribbled in the margins of long nights at Lowell House, where he shared cramped quarters, thin blankets, and cheap coffee that tasted more like hope than caffeine. The smell of instant noodles and burned toast filled the corridors, a reminder that even in a world of privilege, he was the outsider fighting to belong. That assignment would become the seed of Good Will Hunting, a tale of a lost genius searching for connection, written by a young man who was doing the same. Outside the classroom, life was far from comfortable. Money was scarce. His mother couldn't help much, and Damon quietly carried the guilt of every dollar spent. He took small acting gigs between exams, chasing auditions on weekends, hoping one might pay his rent. Dinner was often whatever he and his roommates could find. Half a sandwich split in two, coffee watered down to last another night. The radiator coughed instead of heating, and he learned to fall asleep wearing his coat, his breath fogging in the cold of the room. Some nights, when exhaustion met hunger, he laughed to keep from breaking. Still, he refused to stop. If I don't risk everything, he told himself, they'll never find anything. In 1992, just 12 credits shy of graduation, Damon made the kind of decision that separates dreamers from doers. He left Harvard to chase a movie role in Geronimo, an American legend. It was supposed to be his breakout moment. It wasn't. The film failed. The critics ignored him. And suddenly, the safety net of Harvard was gone. No degree, no backup plan, no money. The applause he had imagined never came. Only the echo of bills piling up and the hum of doubt whispering that he might have made a mistake. He moved to Los Angeles, where dreams were cheaper than rent and harder to keep. The city glittered, but not for him. Damon and his lifelong friend Ben Affleck shared a rundown apartment where the carpet was threadbare, the paint cracked, and a single bulb flickered like it was tired too. Their fridge was mostly empty, milk stretched with water, bread gone stale before payday, but their conviction filled a space the food couldn't. They spent nights hunched over a second-hand typewriter, the click of keys their heartbeat, finishing each other's sentences, chasing a story that might save them. Every rejection letter felt like a bruise, proof that Hollywood didn't care about heart or honesty, only about profit. Some nights they'd talk about quitting, but then one of them would whisper, "Let's try one more page." By day, Damon worked odd jobs, delivering scripts, running errands, taking any role that might cover next week's rent. The city's sun was hot, but its indifference was colder. He sold what little he owned, including the jacket that had kept him warm through Boston winters, trading comfort for another month of persistence. "We were broke, but we had a story," he would later say. "That's what kept us alive." For nearly 3 years, the two friends survived on caffeine, conviction, and a kind of stubborn faith that bordered on madness. Damon learned to turn hunger into discipline, failure into endurance. The typewriter keys wore smooth under their fingers as they rewrote their script dozens of times, cutting, refining, protecting from studios who wanted to own it but not believe in it. Every no carved him sharper. Every sleepless night made him quieter, stronger. And then one long night, the kind that had no promise except the next sunrise, they finished it. Good Will Hunting. The story of a boy too brilliant to believe he was worth loving, written by a man who had once felt the same. They met each other in dim hotel rooms, laughing at the same lines like children hiding from a world. He once told a friend, "She makes even silence sound like music." In 1999, they walked red carpets together, elegant and composed, unaware that the flashbulbs were capturing history. To everyone else, they were Hollywood's golden couple. To themselves, they were just two people lucky enough to find peace in each other's orbit. But fame doesn't sleep, and distance has its own quiet cruelty. As his career grew heavier with new roles and travel, and as she searched for silence away from the spotlight, their worlds began to drift, not with anger, but with absence. There was no slammed door, No harsh goodbye, only a moment when their hands didn't find each other in crowd, and neither tried again. That was how it ended, not in fire, but in fading light. By the spring of 2000, they were no longer seen together. No statements, no accusations, just silence, dignified and final. Winona would later say softly, "We didn't fall apart. We just drifted away." And he, when asked, only smiled, the kind of smile that hides more than it reveals. Years later, when her name came up in interviews, friends noticed how he'd pause, how his eyes would flicker, as if searching through memories he kept carefully folded away. He never spoke ill, never explained, never corrected. Some loves, he seemed to know, are too sacred to be discussed. And when Winona was asked about him, her voice carried both grace and forgiveness. "He's a good man. That's something you never forget." Their love lasted only a few years, brief in time, eternal in memory. It was a kind of love that didn't need tragedy to be unforgettable, because sometimes the quietest stories leave the loudest echoes. Years passed, and their paths diverged into new lives, new families, new peace. But somewhere in the stillness between applause and sleep, he kept that memory, not as regret, but as proof that once his heart was truly home. After years of loving and losing beneath the bright lights of Hollywood, Matt Damon had stopped believing that love and peace could ever live in the same house. The spotlight had taught him beauty, but it had also taught him distance. And then, one night in 2003, life quietly handed him something different. He was in Miami filming Stuck on You, and after a long day on set, a few friends convinced him to grab a drink at a local bar. Behind the counter stood a woman who smiled with a kind of calm that made noise disappear. Her name was Luciana Barroso. She wasn't a movie star. She didn't want anything from him. She was simply kind, grounded, and real. And for Damon, that was the rarest thing in the world. He would later say, "We met in the most unholy way possible." And maybe that's why it lasted. Their connection wasn't built on red carpets or premieres, but on small moments, laughter between shifts, stories shared over music and late-night coffee. Damon, the man who had seen the world from every angle, found himself captivated by a woman who asked for nothing except honesty. Within a year, they were inseparable. In December 2005, they married in a private ceremony in New York. No paparazzi, no spectacle, just family and quiet vows. He adopted her daughter, Alexia, as his own, and together they built a family that grew to include 3 more daughters, Isabella, Gia, and Stella. "The minute I met her," Damon once said, "everything made sense." But love, real love, doesn't stay perfect. Fame never sleeps, but marriage needs silence. There were years when Damon's career pulled him across oceans and time zones. Luciana kept the family grounded while he worked on sets in Europe or Australia, juggling schedules and phone calls that came at dawn. "The hardest part of my job," he admitted, "is the distance." Yet somehow, she never made him feel guilty for chasing his craft, and he never took for granted the world she held together while he was gone. They fought time, not each other. There were nights when distance spoke louder than words, but by morning, one smile, one call, and everything found its way home again. They learned balance in a world that rewards excess. She kept him human. He made her laugh. When critics praised him, she teased him about the dishes still in the sink. When fame tried to follow them home, she shut the door gently and turned the lights low. Damon often said, "My life is real because of her." And it showed. In the way he skipped award shows to attend school plays, and how he called home before every major shoot, in the quiet pride when he spoke of his daughters. They built a home, not a headline, and within those walls, loyalty became their unspoken language. In a world where promises fade like film credits, he kept his heart in one place, choosing her again and again. Of course, there were cracks, not betrayal, but of exhaustion. 2 people for children, endless schedules, and a life forever under scrutiny. But instead of breaking, they learned to bend. There were arguments, misunderstandings, long silences, but also forgiveness, laughter, and grace. They discovered that love isn't a constant feeling. It's a daily decision. Damon once said, "Marriage isn't about finding perfection. It's about choosing the same person, even when it's hard." And that became their quiet ritual. to choose to stay, to believe that what they had was worth the work. Now, after nearly 2 decades, the Damons have found what most people spend a lifetime searching for. Not a fairy tale, but a partnership. He still works, but carefully. If a role keeps him away from home too long, he turns it down. If it takes me from my family, he said, it's not worth it. He wakes early, makes breakfast, trains, reads, and lives a life small enough to fit inside his own heart. There's silver in his hair now, softness in his eyes, but also a quiet pride, the kind that only comes from keeping the promises you made. The man who once lived in the noise of the world has finally found peace. Not because life got easier, but because he learned what truly matters. Because in the end, the greatest story Matt Damon ever told wasn't written on paper or filmed through a lens. It was lived in the laughter of his daughters, in the calm presence of a woman who never needed his fame to love him, and in a marriage that proved one simple truth, that faithfulness, patience, and love are not outdated virtues. They are the quiet miracles that keep a family standing. Sometimes, the most extraordinary love stories are the ones that choose to be ordinary.